Now let's look at how to factor trinomials. As a reminder, trinomials have 3 terms. To factor trinomials, we are going to be using what's known as the AC method. First, arrange the terms in descending order: ax squared plus bx plus c. In other words, the highest exponent needs to be first, and at the very end at the far right needs to be the constant or the plain number. Step 2, if possible, factor out the GCF, or the greatest common factor. Step 3, multiply the leading coefficient a and the constant c. Step 4, find a pair of factors whose product is a times c and whose sum is b, which is the middle term. Step 5, expand the middle term by replacing it with the new factors. Step 6, now you can factor by grouping. Let's look at our first example. 6x squared plus 7x plus 2. Well, first let's check, is it in the correct order? Yes, x squared's first, followed by x, and then we have the constant. Next, we want to see if there is a GCF. Well, we have the numbers 6, 7, and 2. The only number that can divide evenly into these is 1, which means we do not have a common factor. So now we move on to step 3. It says to multiply the coefficient a and c. Well, as a reminder, here is a, here is your c. So on the side of your paper, we're going to do some side work. 6 times 2 equals what? Well, it's a positive 12. Now comes step 4. Step 4 says find a pair of factors whose product is a times c, which means we need to make a list of multiples. 1 times what, 2 times what, 3 times what, and so on to develop our list. It's best to go in order so you don't miss any possible pairs. So 1 times 12 would give me 12. 2 times 6. 3 times 4. And then 4 times 3. But we already have that listed, so our list is complete. Now step 4 again said find a pair of factors whose product is a times c. We've done that. Now the second part says and whose sum is the coefficient of b. This is the part that gets a lot of students, and it depends a lot on this sign right here. The product we found was a positive 12. Because it was a positive, that is giving you a clue. First off, the plus or positive means this is a sum, and it also means that your values are going to have the same sign. Now sum is a fancy word for plus. So we need to find out of our list 2 of the numbers that add to give us our middle term, b. Well, 1 and 12 will never give you 7. 2 and 6 will not add to give you 7. 3 and 4, that's a good possibility. They do add to give you 7. Now we have to check our signs. It's either going to be a positive 3 plus a positive 4, or it's going to be a negative 3 plus a negative 4. What possibility would add to give us a positive 7? Well, it's going to be the positive 3 and positive 4. Now that we have found our pair of factors, step 5 says rewrite the middle term by expanding it. In other words, we are going to replace this middle term by our new factors. So we still have the 6x squared and we still have the plus 2. But the middle terms are the ones that get replaced. Instead of a 7x, we're now going to write it as plus 3x plus 4x. If you notice, we just made the problem go from 3 terms to 4 terms. Why is that helpful? Well, when you have 4 terms, you can now split it in half and do factor by grouping, which is step number 6. Looking at the first 2 terms, we have a 6 and a 3, so the greatest common factor would be a 3. Looking at your variables, x squared and x, the most they have in common is an x, so our GCF is 3x. If we factor 3x out of those 2 terms, that would leave us with 2x plus 1. Again, I was dividing both terms by 3x. Now let's look at our last 2 terms. We have a 4x plus 2. Well, our GCF in this case would be a 2. Now, is it positive or negative? Well, it's positive, so we want to put a plus sign to indicate that. And now we want to factor a 2 out of both of those terms. Well, 4x divided by 2 is 2x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Now, looking at your 2 terms, do you notice anything in common? And hopefully you're seeing the 2x plus 1 and the 2x plus 1. So that means you now have a common factor. And so if we factor the 2x plus 1 out of our expression, that would leave us with 3x plus 2. And that would be your answer in factored form. Alright, looking at example B. We have 12x squared minus 17x minus 5. Well, we always want to see if there is a GCF that's common for all 3 terms. And it turns out the only GCF there is 1. So in other words, we cannot simplify this now. So we're moving on, and we have 3 terms, and when you have 3 terms, we are going to use the AC method, which means we take the first term, A, and multiply it by the last term, C. So on the side of our paper, we're going to multiply 12 times, not 5, but negative 5. And 12 times negative 5 gives us a negative 60. Now that we've created our, we've multiplied our A times C, now we need to create a list of multiples that give you 60. And again, it's best to kind of go in order. 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10, 7 doesn't work, 8 doesn't work, 9 doesn't work, and we already have 10. So our list is complete. Now, we need to look at this sign right here. Notice our product was not 60, it was a negative 60, which means 2 numbers multiply to give you a negative. When 2 numbers multiply to give you a negative, that's telling you that they're going to have different signs. And if you have numbers that have different signs, meaning one's a positive and one's a negative, if you try to add them, are you really adding? And it turns out you don't. You actually subtract. So that sign is telling you from your list, you need numbers that subtract to equal your B value. Now your B value is a negative 17. So from your list, you see what numbers could subtract to give you negative 17. Well, subtracting 1 and 60, that won't work. 2 and 30, well, that only gives you 28. 3 and 20, that seems pretty good. 4 and 15, nope. 5 and 12, now remember, you're subtracting. That does not give you 17. 6 and 10? Nope. So 3 and 20 looks pretty promising. Now we have to decide, is it going to be 3 minus 20 or is it 20 minus 3? Now the result has to be a negative 17. So it turns out our pair is going to be the numbers 3 and negative 20. So we come back to our original problem, and what we do is we are going to expand and replace the middle term with our two new terms. So that's a positive 3x and a negative 20x. And we keep the first and last terms just as they were. So this is still a 12x squared, and this is still a negative 5. So we made it from 3 terms into 4 terms. And the reason why we do that is now we can do factor by grouping, which means we split the problem in half. Well, your first two terms, we have 12x squared plus 3x. So 12 and 3, we think our GCF is 3. We look at our variables, x squared and x, and notice both terms do have an x. So it turns out 3x is our common factor. Now we got to factor that out of our two terms. And so 12x squared divided by 3x gives you 4x. And 3x divided by 3x is a positive 1. So we're done factoring the first two terms. Now let's look at our last two terms. We have a negative 20x minus 5. And the numbers we probably think of 5 would be a common factor. Now notice the leading term is a negative, which means we are going to factor out a negative 5 as well. Okay, so let's factor that out. Negative 20x divided by negative 5 leaves you with 4x. Negative 5 divided by negative 5, negative divided by negative is a positive 1. Well, looking at our two terms, term number 1, whoop, and term number 2, do we notice anything in common? And if you see, we have a 4x plus 1 and a 4x plus 1, so we do have a GCF in common. It's now been revealed. So we're going to factor out 4x plus 1 out of our expression, and that leaves us with 3x minus 5. And that would be your answer in factored form. Alright, example C, we have 4x cubed minus 2x squared minus 2x. Alright, first off we want to see if there's anything in common in our three terms. And if you look at the coefficients 4, 2, and 2, well, they're all even, which means a 2 can factor out of all of them. So we're going to say our GCF is a 2. Now we have x cubed, x squared, and x. Notice each of the terms do have a variable, so our GCF is 2x. So we're going to factor a 2x out of each of these terms. Now remember, factor means to divide. So essentially we are going to divide each and every term by 2x. So the first term, 4x cubed divided by 2x, leaves you with a 2x squared. Negative 2x squared divided by 2x leaves you with a negative 1x, or x. And negative 2x divided by 2x leaves you with a negative 1. So we have factored, but notice we still have three terms to deal with. So we're going to focus all our energy inside there. Now since we have three terms, we are going to have to do the AC method. Now the AC means we're looking at the first term and the last term. So we have a 2, we have a 2 times not 1 but negative 1. And so 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Well, we need to make our list of multiples. 1 times what gives you 2? 2. Good for us, this is a very short list. Well, we now need to pay attention to this sign. Since this is a -2, we need to remember any numbers that multiply to give you a negative is telling you that the signs are going to be different. And if the signs are different, that means you're going to have to subtract to equal your b value. And your b value is the value that's in the middle, which is a -1. Well, since we have a pretty short list, we just need to decide on which one gets the negative. So let's look at it. It's either going to be 1 minus 2 or 2 minus 1. Which one gives us a result of a -1? Well, it's going to be 1 minus 2. So what we're going to do is we are going to expand the middle term. So we keep the 2x squared, but we're now going to replace this middle term with the 2 we just found. So plus 1x, or x, minus 2x, and then we keep the last term minus 1. Now we don't want to forget about this guy. This 2x is out in front. He's like a tag-along. Cannot leave him behind. Okay, so now we need to split our terms in half. Okay, so looking at our first two terms, 2x squared plus x, notice they both have an x in common. And if we factor out an x, that would leave us with 2x plus 1. Now if we look at our last two terms, there appears to be nothing in common, which means the only number that could divide both of them would be a 1. Now because this is a -2x, we're going to keep the negative sign. So we're going to factor out a -1. -2x divided by -1 gives us a positive 2x. -1 divided by -1 is a positive 1. Now, we still cannot forget that this 2x is still out in front being a tag-along. Okay. So again, focusing inside the brackets, we want to see if we have anything in common. And if you notice, we have that 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1, so we do have a common factor. So we want to factor that out. And if I factor that out in front, that would leave me with x minus 1. And then we have that tag along, that 2x is still there. Now each of your terms are now linear, meaning you only see x's, no x squared, no x cubed. So this must mean your answer is fully factored. Are we ready to try it on our own? Good. Let's see. Okay, here is your try it problem. 6x squared minus 13x plus 6. So pause the video, try it, and then once you're done, click play and let's see how you did. Okay. Hopefully you've already tried it, so let's see. First off, we always look for a GCF, and it turns out there's no number other than 1 that can evenly divide our three terms. So we say we have no GCF. So we're going to apply the AC method. Again, here's your A, there's your C. 6 times 6 equals a positive 36. Now we create a list of multiples. Again, I suggest you go in order. 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 5 does not work, and 6 times 6. Now, look at that sign. Because this is a positive, that means two numbers have the same sign to give you a positive result. That means they're either both positive or they're both negative. So we have to find the numbers that add to give you your middle term. 1 and 36 will not give you -13. 2 and 18, nope. 3 and 12, no. 4 and 9, that's a good one. So it's either going to be 4 plus 9 or negative 4 plus negative 9. And since I need it to be a negative 13x, it's going to be the negative pair. So we expand the middle term. So we keep the 6x squared. We now have a negative 4x and a negative 9x. And we keep the plus 6. Now if you put the order of the 4 and the 9 and you switched them, that is okay. It just means the next few steps may look a little different, but your answer should be the same. Now that we have 4 terms, we're going to split it down the middle. We're going to cut the problem in half. The first 2 terms, they have a common factor. They both have a 2 and an x in common. We factor that out. That will leave me with 3x minus 2. I look at my last 2 terms, and they have a 3 in common. And because it started with a negative, we keep the negative sign. And I divide those 2 factors by negative 3. That leaves me with a 3x minus 2. Looking at my 2 terms, I now see the GCF as common. I have a 3x minus 2 and a 3x minus 2. So you factor that out. And if I undistribute that from the 2 terms, that would leave me with 2x, woohoo, 2x minus 3. Now your answer can be written like this, or if you have 2x minus 3 times 3x minus 2, that is okay, it's still correct. So the order of these is not important, they just got to be the same. I hope that helps, and I hope you're doing great.